topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. This isn't just a podcast. This is a call to action for all entrepreneurs who are tired of seeing their businesses and communities suffer while big business continues to grow by the billions. We challenge you to apply the content of our time together to create businesses that your clients can't resist, your employees love to work for, and your communities can depend on. Now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. Yes, now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. Now is the time for you to ascend in your business and in your life. And we've got somebody here, very special, Ellie Wharton, and she's going to be talking with us about how, well, we talked about estate plans before, right? But estate planning is kind of one piece of the puzzle of ensuring your family's legacy, and maybe even helping your parents and your loved ones to be able to ensure their legacy. But there's a lot that goes into it, and Ellie's had a variety of experiences with her own life and her building her own legacies, and then also some very close personal experiences that she's going to share that really led to this book. And so without further ado, we're going to take a quick break and then bring on Ellie. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, and we're back, and welcome, Ellie.
Thank you so much. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing great. It's a nice kind of rainy day here in St. Louis, but we know that April showers bring Mayflowers.
That's right, and we know what Mayflowers brought.
Yep, pilgrims.
How old is that joke?
I don't know, older than America, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those generational things. We all grow up with it, but nobody knows the origin of it. Well, we all know it.
Right. Somebody came up with that and left quite the legacy, though, didn't they?
That's right. I hope they're getting some royalties from it. At least, their heirs are getting.
Oh no! Now that we mentioned on air, they might ping us for the royalties. Dang it! So should have done our research before that.
That's right.
Well, Ellie, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's really one of the things when you stop and think about legacies, how people can say, well, I really don't have anything. I didn't have much, You don't realize that your great grandmother, your grandmother might be sitting on an old penny or a first edition cartoon book, or you never know what really is out there that is of value that could be used for your family, towards your businesses, especially, as we talk about that. But everything that I see, maybe I'm just obsessed with this now, is leading towards legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've even heard directly of people going in somebody's home and finding millions of dollars stuffed in mattresses and in walls and books and actually, I was just talking to somebody recently. They actually had an uncle that never had any kids, and they never really knew how much he had. He had over $100 million worth of properties and investments, and nobody knew. I mean, the guy lived pretty simply, and so it's if the things weren't set up correctly, if it wasn't set up to probably best, and it sounds like there was a lot that wasn't really set up properly,
Right.
it can lead to a lot of problems. So,
And that is the crux of it when you think about it. That's what I learned through my own life, that if you don't have it set up properly, yeah, you die and you go on, you don't care because you're not here. But it's the afterlife business that can make the difference in how well your family does for generations to come.
hmm
It's like
hmm
every generation, the mistake that you make in terms of your finances, in terms of organizing yourself, it will impact your generations to come. It may not stop
yeah,
generations from becoming successful, but it may be an obstacle.
hmm
It may not allow it to happen as soon as it's supposed to happen.
Well, a topic that I love that's really kind of in this vein as well is generational wealth and that concept. And it's not always necessarily straight up money, but it is possibly passing on knowledge or heirlooms or
Heirlooms, that's right.
so there's a lot of different ways that it can present itself. But that idea of generational wealth and what are you passing on to the future generations is is something that I think a lot of people don't really grasp or understand or appreciate, especially in certain communities and cultures. Unfortunately, sometimes it's kind of almost looked at negatively. Unfortunately, which I think just kind of continues a cycle
The
of
cycle.
yeah.
And the
uh,
thing is a lot of it though is a lack of exposure. A
mm,
lack of
mhm,
exposure to what can be done by people that you can trust. A
mhm,
lot of communities have been held back intentionally so that other groups can prosper. And so what
absolutely.
that has done has built up a legacy of mistrust.
Mhm.
And so if that's all you see as being the example, then you don't trust that system.
That's
You
fair.
go back to
Yeah.
putting the stuff in the money in the mattress kind of
Right. Right.
mentality.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
Well.
posted something the other day, Matt, and just to think about what we were just talking about, and it was Elon Musk had said that poor people are poor because they spend their money. Middle
Mm,
class people are middle class because they save their money, but rich people are rich because they invest their money.
mhm.
And that's what we're really talking about is investing your time, your talent, and everything that you have today. Not necessarily for yourself. You
Mhm.
may be looking at your grandchild running around your house. I have great grandchildren now.
Mhm.
And I think about that what has helped me in life has been what my parents were able to do.
Mm,
Coming out of segregation, getting their first home, being able to pass that home on to us, but most importantly, being able to use a lot of the instruments that are available
mhm.
that help to pass on generational wealth. And businesses, especially in the African American and minority communities, is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge because that's how
Yeah.
many businesses started, being the barbershop, being the beauty shop, being the grocery store owner, being the person who comes around and cuts your lawn or delivers your vegetables and your dairy and things like that, cleans up your
Mhm.
yard. Entrepreneurship begins there.
Mhm. Yeah, and that drive for entrepreneurship and that understanding of how important it is, I think that's a key part of even that idea of generational wealth. I mean, there's the money aspect of it, but the heart of entrepreneurship, the heart of wanting to go out there and build something that's going to give you back more and build more for your family and something that you can own and pass on. And I think that's sometimes looked down upon, but or it's it's that there's an expectation of that where it's a business owner, which is not necessarily quite the same thing as an entrepreneur, because a business owner, it kind of like you were talking about equating like the poor people versus middle class versus rich people. Well, there's somebody who can be a business owner and they maybe own an LLC, and that's great. But they're probably working in the business a lot. And
Yeah, sure.
that entrepreneurial mindset is whenever you realize that you need to equip and empower others and build the right kind of systems and automation and the teams to be able to run the business for you. And that is even a stronger legacy, because not only is it for your family, right? That's also for all the people who are involved and their families, and you have a bigger impact on the community, and you can just do a lot more for the people around you that lives on. Maybe get your name on the side of a gym or something. Get a scoreboard named after you. I don't know.
Exactly, and that is a good point that you bring up, Matt, the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur. I'd never
Hmm.
really looked at it that way, and that's a very good thought, because you do have people that are scrambling out here, really scrambling to do
Yeah,
everything in their business. And you're right, it is a set of
yeah.
systems. Even something as what people see as easy as how easy you make this podcast look. There is a system that goes into it
Hmm.
that if any part of it breaks down, it messes up everything.
Right, right. Yeah, I was
And
actually
that was important. That's really important.
yeah. Yeah, and there's got to be backup systems too. I was actually listening recently to the Tim Ferriss show, and he was talking about how when he does a podcast, I think he's got like 4 or 5 like backup systems, and so that he can always use it in some way. But yeah, we've got systems and backup systems and whatnot. So I know that the audience, they love to hear stories too. They love to hear the stories of the guests, and you've had a pretty interesting entrepreneurial journey, a lot in the broadcasting industry, as well as this book that you've got out as well. So I'm just curious, can you kind of walk us through what was your entrepreneurial journey like?
I was always interested in technology. I think I was always a little bit ahead of my time.
Mm-hmm.
I saw broadcasting and public speaking as a way to break out of the barriers. Remember, I came out of segregation, so there was a lot of uh, those of us that were pushed forward into forward positions, like in broadcasting, and the ones that were you're going to be seen. We were kind of like the icebreakers. So it's like there were a lot of expectations, but there was a lot of learning the business from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what started it for me, was learning the business from the ground up from when I was in junior college, putting together a little radio station in the community college's lunchroom. And that was the community radio station. But guess what? It brought people into the lunchroom. They started buying more lunches. They started hanging around more, interacting. It was fun. And then being in San Francisco and starting my career there was really interesting during the 70s because there was so much going on. But once again, because broadcasting was very raw, it was owned by just a few networks, you learned everything from the ground up. If you were on air, you were an engineer. You had to have a third class FCC license, or else you couldn't just be on the air just as a talking head. So that really was the start for me, believe it or not. And then as I kind of continued on in broadcasting, being able to be exposed to the technology, that's the part that really excited me. And then go fast forwarding all the way to Webster Groves and setting up a 100-watt radio station for the community there. Again, being able to utilize the technology, being able to utilize my experience from way back, said to me, this was a legacy. And you never met my late husband, Keith, but my husband was dying of cancer at the time I was building the radio station. And at first, when we found out that he had cancer, I said, you know what? I don't know if I can do both of these. This is too much. He turned to me and he said, you know what? This is your legacy. That
Wow.
was an interesting start to the journey when he said that to me. This is your legacy. You go do this. And yeah, it was a hard juggle, but guess what? That radio station is still on the air today, still pumping out information, dropping knowledge. That's a legacy to me.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and through that process, you even were able to become a citizen of the year of Webster Groves, right?
That in itself is a story, again, coming out of segregation, and as a child, not being able to go to that country club.
Mm.
It was such an honor that night to take my mother, who I think at the time was probably about 89 years old, have her
Wow.
arm in arm and say, "Mom, we're walking through the front door of this country club."
Wow.
It
Wow.
meant a lot, and that is the exciting part, and then being able to see how it can impact others within the community becomes their voice. And believe it or not, it is those experiences that then led me to the book, because it was the
Yeah.
death of my own husband, the passing of my mother, that made it different, because it gave me certain assets because they had put things in order.
Mm.
And
Wow.
as I was putting this book together, Matt, it was interesting that I ran into so many people who could relate exactly to what I was talking about, because they had gone through it in one form or fashion.
Mm.
Whether it be that, the father passed suddenly, and then all of a sudden the older daughter from another marriage shows up, or a business owner who passed away suddenly in his office and has three heirs. One of them cares nothing about the business. The other one is like, "Oh, a business," and you know, and the other one who's been involved. So how do they begin to look at that? It was amazing how many people are going through this situation, but it all boils down to knowledge and
Hmm.
exposure to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to gloss over too much real quick. If we can take a step back to the power of that being the citizen of the year as well. And I mean, the radio station, I mean, it came from kind of a dream that started, like you said, when you were a kid at school and you started a radio station in the cafeteria. And how many years was that between that first radio station and
Oh,
citizen of the year?
oh, Matt, now you're really trying to let
No,
me tell you
well,
how old I am. But I will tell you that the radio station in the campus lunchroom was in the 70s,
okay, all right.
early 70s.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah,
You
I'm
know,
just the tenacity and the persistence that you've shown, throughout the years, and even starting that radio station was no small feat. You had to go into that community and raise almost $500,000 to start it,
raise
didn't you?
money, and not only
Hmm.
that, just raise the vision.
Yeah,
Not just
yeah.
that, raise the vision, because imagine that owning a radio station or any kind of media, before we really got into podcasting and home studios and things like that, people did not see themselves being able to own that kind of stuff because only rich people own that.
Hmm.
So now all of a sudden you're coming along saying, "Oh, no, no, we can do this." Yeah, it's not been done.
Wow.
It's not been done. So therefore you have to raise the vision first. Then
Hmm.
once people began to see the vision of it, and how it could apply to their life. Then they began to buy into it, but it did not happen easily. I'll tell you that. It was fighting tooth and nail because people could not see the vision of it.
Mm. Hmm.
And so that's with anything, it's just like you said with entrepreneurship. You have that vision of something and you come to your family and you tell them you've got this great vision of something and they all look at you like, deer in the headlights.
Right, right. Yeah. So what do you feel was key to helping to be able to share that vision and keep people excited about it?
Because people love live radio. People still love radio. It was the first love in this country. It brought us all kinds of information. I can remember when I was a kid sitting around the radio listening to Muhammad Ali fights. Back then he was Cassius Clay, and Joe Frazier. Listening to it on the radio.
Wow.
So you can imagine how exciting it was when I finally saw it on television, because that was how we learned about everything, was through the radio. And you had programs and shows and then, with sound effects and scripts and everything, and all of that was done with radio. And so you do find people in pockets that still believe in that magic of radio and the power that it has, especially when you can begin to segment it like we did with the community radio station with KWRH.
Hmm.
because in markets like St. Louis, it can be too expensive for the average guy. You know how that can be for the average guy to advertise effectively or to even get his message out.
Hmm.
But if you can put it into a localized format, then it has power. And you have a bunch of those around your community, then you have power because now you have forums. And that helps people to get understanding, engagement in their community, and involvement in whatever aspect of what's going on.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
So,
one of the things, let me just also think about this. One of the things that was interesting, because you know that I've gone through those political cycles too, where at first, we were calling candidates to ask them if they would come on board and do interviews. By the second year, they were calling us, asking us to be on the air. And so there was one race in particular at the time that was I think it was the prosecuting attorney's position, and we had called the incumbent who refused to come on, or was too busy, and we did get his competitor to come on. And don't you know, after that, then the incumbents called us and wanted to come on, so people were listening. And that's the key thing I think is important. What you're doing is important so that people hear other perspectives.
absolutely.
Yeah, that they
Absolutely.
know
Well,
they know that they're not out there alone.
yeah, I think that you hit upon something key there too, whenever you're talking about that vision and kind of how that vision tied back to their own personal visions and the things that are important to them in their life. So you had
Hmm.
this great vision of building this radio station and bringing it into the community, but you said what tied that to people, what helped to get them excited about it was helping them to understand the the power it might have, the influence it might have in their own lives.
That's it. That is the key thing, is helping people to understand how what your vision is. It's like, a lot of times what happens is that we try to um, see a problem and solve it.
Mm,
And then that, that's the way we go at it. And the thing is that when we see what the problem is, we come up with the solution, we get the buy-in that we're looking for.
mhm.
Versus saying, "This is the problem over here," which is what the vision was. "This is the
Right,
vision over
right.
here. You really want this."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and
You
and I
know?
and I think that comes into play, and we're gonna take a quick break here in a second, but I think that comes into play even when we're talking about this legacy stuff, for
Yeah.
ourselves and for our family members, because I think that if you say a lot of people, "Hey, you wanna make sure things are set up well for when you move on," people are like, "Well, uh, like you said earlier, I'm not gonna be
I'm
here."
not gonna
Like,
be
what?
here.
Doesn't bug me too much at that point, now does it? So yeah, we'll have to figure out how that ties back to their own vision and everything as well. So we'll take a quick break and we'll come back
Okay.
on that note. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, and we're back, and we were talking about Ellie's entrepreneurial journey, and she's got a fantastic book that really I think highlights that something that's so important for so many of our audience members about preparing for the great. It's called Preparing for the Great Beyond: Transformative Practices for Creating a Family Legacy. And Jason, can you throw that up here for us so we can see the cover? There it is. There it is. So preparing for the great beyond. All right. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that.
Now,
So
Matt, I also want to
yes.
say that I have this is make sure I pointed towards the camera there.
Right.
This, this is the handbook that goes along with the
Ah,
book,
yeah.
because the idea is the book tells you exactly what it is that you need to do, how to organize it, but the handbook now is what you have for each and every person. This is what
Hmm.
is filled out,
Okay.
so that
Okay.
when it comes time for Aunt Martha's services, everybody's not running around like with a chicken with their head cut off. They know where the book is. It's got the information. It's got everything laid out because you've already had your presentation. You've done everything with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, so you can actually go to the funeral and grieve.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, or celebrate life,
That's
and
it. Exactly. Exactly. And
that.
that's the key, is that there's so much for people to really know. It's almost like prying. It almost I
Mhm.
think that's why it has to be done among family members.
Mhm.
Because you want the family to be engaged in this process. And again, even we know that can create issues
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
families have their own hidden secrets, but it's some of those secrets that could make a difference in the family's legacy.
Mhm.
Imagine, you got grandma and grandpa who are 90 years old, but when they were young people, bought a whole bunch of plots of land within a city, and they still
Mhm.
own it, and they've been paying
Mhm.
taxes on it all these years. They passed away. What happens to all those plots of land that nobody knew existed? You know, but if you knew that it existed and it was set up correctly, legally, with beneficiary deeds, things like that, those are assets. They could
Yeah.
turn around and sell those plots of land. They could turn around and build on it. They could put a community garden on there. They could do something with that plot of land that becomes an asset to the family as a whole. I'm going to say something really, really, people are going to think this is kind of callous, but every time somebody in your family dies, your family should become wealthier. That person has
Hmm.
some assets. Even if it was the homeless person that you thought had nothing. I have a story in my book about that where there was an Asian woman who had passed away in San Francisco, and she was a well known homeless woman in a particular area. But they found her dead basically of exposure. She had on an old raggedy coat that she always wore. Nobody really knew her name. They just knew her from seeing her. But when she passed away, they kind of remembered her first name. No relatives, no nothing. They came and carted her off to the morgue, cut off her clothes. She had $600,000 sewn into her coat. Probably would help
Wow.
keep her warm for a while. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Wow.
let's say that now all of a sudden an heir reads it in the newspaper and goes, "You know what? That's Auntie Jane."
Mhm. Mhm.
Now all of a sudden there's afterlife business that has to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And so how
Yeah.
does the family benefit? Do they benefit from having things put in order, or or does it become an albatross? Because that can happen too, because especially with property, it can become an albatross because it goes into probate, and now all of a sudden you're tied up into litigation and courts and stuff for a year.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually had an estate planner on a little while back, and he pointed out that if you've got a business, basically everything about that business becomes public during that process. Like, if it goes to probate,
That's right.
like, it becomes a distressed business. So even if you try to sell it, it's a
Yes,
distressed business,
it's a distressed
anybody
business.
anybody who goes to sell it, they basically know everything about it because uh, it's all been displayed in the court documents, right? So
Right.
a lot of people don't understand I mean, scary that is. It could take something that was meant to be a legacy to pass on and turn it into just actually a horrible curse.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we want to avoid. I always tell people that I'm of an age, since you made me talk about when I started the radio station back in the
Sorry, sorry,
I'm
my
in the
bad.
age
I
where
don't
I
know what
was,
I was
yeah,
thinking.
I don't know what you were thinking of, but anyway, I always say that the last 30 years of my life are going to be just me constantly just telling people what I've learned before, because you take your life in segments, and you
Mhm.
know that there's that segment where you're kind of doing the family thing, you're raising the kids, you're trying to, just build, then you kind of get into a stage where you've built and now you say, you know what, I got a little cushion here. In addition to a little monthly, getaway, I can have dinner and do a getaway. But then when you get older, you realize that, you know what, that you didn't probably do enough in that sense. You always feel like you didn't do enough. But the thing of it is that building a legacy is a growth process. It's like what I have or what my parents had, the home that they had, and the assets that they had, I was able to build upon, and then I grow and I have assets. So I don't just go, like go out and buy, a Ferrari. I invest that money and move it forward to the next. I buy a home. I have property. I do this. I have a business. It's how we look at everything from the not our own standpoint, but from the next. And as you get older, you do kind of get more into that retrospect. I wish I had but
Right, right, right.
but the thing is that you have to start now. You have to start with where you are.
So so it starts with you to start considering your own thing. So what kind of so if you're trying to start, what is step one, would you say?
Well, of course, the first step is to read my book, because that's going to help them to understand the whole process that I've put together. What I did was I put together a formula called the LHFF formula, which stands for the legal, health, finance, and family concerns. I also say it's pronounced like laugh, because if you don't have it together, you won't be laughing at the end. That is for sure.
You won't have the last laugh?
Nope, you won't have the laugh. Good for you, rim shot.
Right, right.
But it's understanding all of those different aspects of a person's life. And everybody has some of that, believe it or not. Just even the medical. Let me give you an example of the medical. With medical power of attorney, my mother passed away in 2020. In the mess of everything that was going on, she didn't die of COVID, but she passed on. She was 91
Mm,
years old, and the morning that she passed on, everything happened very, very suddenly. I get a phone call at 8:30 in the morning, and it's from my daughter saying they're loading mom down the stairs into a stretcher into an ambulance. She's going to the hospital. Within 20 minutes, the hospital is calling me and saying, "We need your permission, intubate or do not resuscitate." Uh, I'm like,
wow,
"What? What?
wow.
Hello?" But the thing is my daughter was right there, but I was the one that had the medical power of attorney. And my daughter had the paperwork. And so they had to still get in touch with me to ask me that basic question. Now, in the middle of a panic, you can imagine, here's my mother, what am I going to say? But my mother and I had discussed it already. So I knew what her wishes were.
Mm,
You see, and it's little things like that that I pass on in the book because a lot of times people don't realize that that's the situation that you're in real life.
mhm.
Knowing the legal aspects of especially a business. How's the business set up? Was it really truly set up properly in the first place?
Yeah.
Are there angel investors? What is the other aspect? What are the liens? What are the loans? What are the deeds? What are the expenses? What's the output? All of a sudden somebody inherits a business and boom, they find out that what this thing is where?
Mhm.
And then knowing more about the financials. I'm getting ready to come out with another ebook that basically explains all of the different financials. There's so much in the financial part of it that people need to understand. And I'm gonna tell you, if you're not a bit, my husband he was a brainiac when it came to numbers. I'm the wordsmith, but the financials, understanding the financial terms is key
Mhm.
because there's a lot of stuff. And when you're reading contracts, you're trying to understand, well, what does this word mean versus this word? If you don't understand, you might sign your life away.
Mhm.
And then
Hmm.
just finding out what the family themselves, what does the person themselves want? My husband was adamant. He wanted to be cremated. And so he was. And
Hmm.
so, you, you know, but that was his choice. And again, it took the burden off of me. I'm trying to build a radio station, have a dying husband, and all of these last minute things. But again, everything was in place. Everything was set in place so that when we had the memorial service, we were able to memorialize.
Mhm. That's wonderful.
And
That
that's
makes
what I hope that businesses will do is really look at their family's assets and not get into a place
mhm.
where, well, I don't want to tell him that, I don't want them to know that we're in debt or I don't want them to know we have bankruptcy or all that stuff. When you die doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean
Sure.
anything, but it means everything to the people that are left behind.
So you gotta do it for yourself and you gotta do it for others.
Absolutely.
How can you get like your loved ones involved and excited about or at least interested, engaged in some respect
Engaged.
with the process?
It's a conversation, Matt. It's not something that's going to happen readily for many families because, like I said, there's so many people that have their own special secrets, their own things that they just really don't want to divulge. Because in my book, I'm saying that you really need to know everything. You need to know. I can remember that when my husband passed, he had everything in a book. And he had every PIN number, every password, everything, every account number, everything. And so I was able to look in that one book and find everything that I needed. And it made things so much better, several days when I actually my brain, I began to like focus like, "Oh my gosh, this has just happened to me." People sometimes we have plenty of time. I did have years to prepare for that. With my mother, I had minutes to prepare. um,
Mhm.
some people, especially during COVID, if this is what made me start thinking about the whole thing, it was during COVID when families were dying together, mother and father what's happening to these kids. See, we're not hearing those backstories. And a lot
Yeah.
of times because people weren't prepared, maybe they didn't even have insurance. How do people get buried? How do one of the stories I have in the book is from an undertaker, and he talked about how, with one family, because there was no insurance, it took 3 months for them to bury that family member. That family member was sitting in the morgue for 3 months. Imagine the stress that family was going through.
Wow.
You can't
Yeah.
even move forward. And when it comes to entrepreneurs, we don't have that kind of time to just sit back. 3 months could mean the difference of I'm flourishing versus I'm perishing.
Hmm.
So I am just adamant that business owners need to get all of this stuff laid out. A lot of people say, "Yeah, I have some of it," and yes, I know you need all of it because when something does happen, whatever it may be, the people that are left are the ones that are going to have to deal with the afterlife business. And it's not a popular subject. I understand that. But it is one that everyone is going to face.
Well, with business owners, going back to that idea of legacy, like if that's one of the key drivers for a lot of people with their businesses is leaving
Yes,
some sort of legacy. And
absolutely.
and to not think about how to do that right, just to push it off or avoid the conversation or just think, well, they'll figure it out. I mean,
No.
yeah.
No, there need to be clear instructions on what the next step is because of course with every generation they're going to come in with new ideas. Well, we should be doing it this way or the color should like be we should change the logo. We should, yes, those things may change, but the core values of the company, that's what has to be locked in.
Hmm.
So that when the people are coming next, they're not twisting this thing all the way around and all of a sudden, you know, um, when you used to sell milk, now you're selling steaks. You know,
Right.
that's
Right.
just a wild example, but you may expand into selling steaks, but
Fair. Fair.
but yeah, you understand it's like you said, it is a legacy. I know I saw something the other day, and it just made my heart leap with joy to see this that in Webster Groves, a local newspaper that had been around since forever, thrown on a Thursday night in my neighborhood, always chock full of information, is finally back. And they came back by popular demand. I mean, they did have a digital, forum, but they're actually back. And it's good to see that we're getting back to the tangibles. That's what this whole thing is about. It's the tangibles. Because we have all of this technology and everything we want to put it up on the cloud. And I agree that everything should be up on the cloud as well. So no matter where you are, you can access your information. But again, you
Hmm.
still have to have technology and power to do it.
Hmm.
So, you still need to be able to know where's this book?
Right. Right.
When I go in
Where's
Uncle Fred's house, where's this book?
hmm hmm
And sometimes, especially with all these storms coming up that we've had down here in the South, you know what? You may only have a short period of time to get your information.
hmm
And I mean, you think about it. We see stories, especially down here in the South, where we know there's a tornado coming through somewhere. And last week, when they had the big tornado over in Slidell and over in New Orleans, I'm sitting over here in Long Beach. actually watching the video of it through the news station. How scary is that? And then the next morning, you see all of the destruction, and there are people inside of homes, and they said, "My home looked like this yesterday, and now it looks like this." How much time did they have to grab their information?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the first thing they're going to have to do? They need insurance. They need identification. Their needs are so great, and it's hard for you to manage all of that when you're in the midst of the crises.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why something as simple as a little simple booklet with information documented. And when you get the family members in to realize it's something just as simple as this.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just people have to just see it's just this. And you have trusted agents within your family to do the interviewing. Not the gossip monger, not the not the spendthrift. They can't do it. You need the person who's kind of just a solid, maybe behind the scenes kind of cousin
Mm-hmm.
that everybody loves but
Well,
never raise the fuss. Everybody trusts, everybody loves. That's the person, and then others come along to help because it can be a big task.
mm,
Nobody's going to give you all the information, in one sitting. It's not going to be like, "Hey, grandma, tell me everything about your life." It's not
right,
going to
right.
happen like that.
So, so there's a lot of information that you have to gather, right? You got to gather the different assets or the things that people might not know about. Like, what do you have hidden away? Or, I mean,
Yeah.
how do you ask that question? Like, hey, how much money got hidden in the mattress? Like, I mean, they're hiding it for a reason, right? Like, I mean, they got to really, really trust you for them to be like, oh yeah, here, let's go count it together. Like,
It is true that is going to be a big part, and that's why family is part of the laugh formula because it is about creating the right temperature, the right climate within a family to where
mm,
people are trusting of one another. That's again how legacies are built, and they're built in numbers of ways. One is through the word, through the written, through the spoken word, so that you know who your great grandparents are and their grandparents, and you can trace to a certain extent. That's one way to keep your legacy intact. But then also, I know I think back on older people when I was young and didn't even think about asking these kind of questions. And now that I'm older, it's like, I never met Uncle Clarence's brother. What
mm,
what was his name? What was his wife's? It's those kind of questions that hopefully families can, if nothing else, begin to start building on.
mm-hmm.
And that could be a good way for them to start building on is to build on the family branch. And then people start remembering, "Oh, you know what? That's right. Cousin Charles, wasn't she married to, you know what? They used to have some property down in, and that's how memories begin to flow and
Well, that's it.
information comes out. You can't do it just like rapid fire. Like I said, it's not like, okay, Granny, tell me where you hold all the loot.
Right, right.
Can't
Give me
do
all your
that.
money. Give me all your money.
And your PIN number and your password.
Yeah, and yeah. So that's interesting. That idea of incorporating into kind of a historical conversation and just about relationships and about. I mean, you might even identify people that might might they might want to be more involved, or they might want to pass something on to, or that would have otherwise shown up out of the blue and said, hey, I deserve some of this, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing is that with young people, especially with the technology today, they should not be overlooked as well. We always look at legacy from a standpoint of older people, but younger people are building legacies as well. I have a nephew that has been doing his thing on Spotify for years. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
we need to
yeah.
know that he's got something going, something that's,
Mm-hmm.
and again, subscription, something as simple as subscriptions.
Yeah.
You've got an open bank account that maybe you have a joint bank account so that the money is already you have control of it, but you've got subscriptions coming out that you didn't even know. Now,
Well,
most of us have got those with those financial magazines, and so we
that's
we order them online and then we forget about them until another year goes by. But
yeah,
older people
that's
especially will have subscriptions. My mother had like Omaha Steaks and Publishers Clearinghouse. I mean, she had so many subscriptions.
yeah.
It was a mess, but at least I knew which ones to contact right away. I
Mhm.
knew how to turn off the utilities. I had, utility numbers. I knew where the bank accounts were. I knew where pensions were and insurances and, the legal parts of the house and the deeds. And those are the important things that people need to have right away.
Well, I think you hit upon something that's probably often overlooked. The was it the nephew with Spotify. There might be some artists that aren't found until after they pass away. I mean, how often is that people become more popular after they pass away? But
Yes,
especially if their stuff's out there, I mean, even a YouTube channel like might suddenly pick up or something. I mean, we don't really necessarily know. It might be something that we might readily dismiss, but I mean, Van Gogh. I mean, you look at Van Gogh,
that's right.
and his art. He never really lived to see how popular it got, but
That's why I
that's an
said
interest.
sometimes in some families it could be something as simple as a coin
Mm,
that
mm-hmm,
that somebody was sitting on for years and never thought anything of, or it could be a first edition comic book that's now worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. You
mm-hmm,
just never know, and so you cannot just automatically assume that people have nothing.
mm-hmm.
Everybody that has lived has something, even if it's nothing more than a memory.
Yeah,
And again, that's another form of legacy is being able to, I think most people want to leave behind a legacy where people think kindly of them. Now, I don't think that there's really a lot of people. There may be some that, that die and it's like, I'm dead and I don't care.
right,
But
right.
even if it's just being able to leave the legacy of she was a good person. He was a good person.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
left and leave if leave nothing else. What else are you doing when you're sitting there watching TV? Put your business in order.
right, right. Yeah. So we've only got a few more minutes left, and
Oh, darn.
I think with this topic especially, I kind of always like to ask this question about like what advice you would give to your 16-year-old self. You know, if you got a chance to talk with her. Um,
It goes back to the whole thing of now knowing that it is investing, that
mm,
investing is the way
mm,
to build on your wealth. We came from a generation, my mom and dad came out of the depression, so everything of course was save, save, save.
mm,
And they were good, they were great middle class people because they saved. Unfortunately, our younger generation, they're the poor ones, they want to spend, spend, spend. And unfortunately, we get to the point where then we know enough to then realize we have to invest, invest, invest. But now there's so much to invest in. We just again, that's why we have to listen to programs like this so that we know what to invest in. There's so much out there.
hmm
But it's the whole thing of knowing and understanding. That's the whole advice I would give people. The information is out there. It is just needed to for people to ingrain it
hmm,
and realize it is real. That if you don't do it and you don't do it now, it's kind of like anything else that we really do. It's like, do you take your car in every 3 months to get the oil change? And if you're not, shame on you, or if you're not going every year for your male and female exam or every 2 years, it's certain things that you kind of just have to do. You don't necessarily want to do them, but you have to do them. But this is what you really have to do. You really have to organize. You really have to get back into the family mode so
hmm.
that you understand what assets you have and you don't just let them pass away. Just don't go through taxation or legal or whatever else, whoever else gobbles up the money.
Yeah,
It's your money. It's your family's money. It's the difference between Johnny going to college or not going to college, or Susie starting her own business, that she's always wanted to do. You know, it's that difference.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing the difference that this can make in people's lives in terms of and like we said before, businesses can be a blessing to pass on, but or it could be a curse. And then you could have a celebration of life, or you could be worrying about all the things that you've got to take care of now that somebody's passed on. But
Exactly.
so that's why it's so important to get ahead of it and for yourself and to help others to do the same, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is key. And again, it just comes from living life. And
Hmm.
knowing, I mean, yes, there is a secret formula. That's the LHFF secret formula, right?
Right.
But it really is, once you get into it, it makes so much sense. It
Hmm.
really does. When I
Hmm.
talk to people about it, they go, you know what, you are so right about this. And so many people just, I never even thought of it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for helping us think about it. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to know more?
Well, they can certainly go on Amazon and look for
Hmm.
my book, which is, you want to flash a little sign up there again, Preparing for
Yeah,
the Great Beyond. Transformative practices, there you go. That's a good way. And people can also send me information at info at legacy transformation.com. That's info at legacy transformation.com. I would
perfect.
love to be able to share this information, especially with community groups, and people that are really not on the forefront of this, people like yourself that have investors and doctors and lawyers and people like that on, you know, but more people like me that just don't have access but
Right, right.
want
Well,
it.
perfect. Thank you so much. And
Thank
thank
you,
you for
Matt.
listening. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for being with us today. But now is the time to put what we talked about into practice. Remember, your family, employees, and community are depending on you to rise up and win. The great news is you're not alone. You're part of a resurgence of entrepreneurs who are ready to take their business, life, and impact to the next level, and we're going to do it together. This show is powered by Time for Success, where we help business owners every day who want more freedom and wealth while building a legacy of positive impact. Please follow Time for Success on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for more helpful strategies and tools for creating the business and life of your dreams.